Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Vital Voices. My name is Sabah Gori, and I'm really happy to see you all here and to welcome you to our Vital Voices headquarters. I'm really excited that you all are here, our friends, our partners, and our colleagues, Afghan women leaders, for joining us on the launch of our very new, exciting Aghaaz Fellowship Program. And we will also, of course, reflect on everything that has happened since that sad day 3 years ago on August 15th. Since the fall of Kabul to the Taliban in August 2021, Vital Voices and its partners, Georgetown University's Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, and the State Department evacuated over 1,200 women at risk, Afghan women leaders and their families, where they waited in Albania while they were being resettled to Canada, the United States, and a few other countries. I'm honored to see some of you all here in the audience, some of you who were in Albania on that journey, and you're now here. In Albania, because of our support and our partnership with 2 local partners, we were able to provide support, housing, education, psychosocial support, medical assistance, English and computer classes, as well as vocational and life skills training. Only 9 women and their families remain so far, and I believe they have joined us online. We are working tirelessly to get them resettled as well. We have not forgotten about them, and we work with them very closely and with the State Department on getting their cases resolved as well. Also inside of Afghanistan and Pakistan, through support from our Department of State-funded Voices Against Violence program, we have been responding to the needs of Afghan women at risk through grants to local Afghan women-led organizations, as well as through our Urgent Assistance Fund. The Urgent Assistance Fund has helped women relocate to safe houses, provided trauma counseling, and other urgent living expenses, such as food and medical costs. Vital Voices was one of the first organizations to get funds inside of Afghanistan to support women after the fall of Kabul, and Vital Voices continues to do so at a steady rate. Today, as we gather to reflect on the human rights challenges facing women and really strategize around their meaningful inclusion in Doha talks and the future of their country, it's crucial to recognize the resilience and determination of Afghan women, both within Afghanistan and in the diaspora. Even after fleeing Afghanistan in August 2021, Afghan women, such as yourselves, many of you are here in this audience, have continued your advocacy efforts, raising your voices, sharing your stories, and mobilizing support for your sisters back home. And even though the news coming out of Afghanistan is difficult to bear, the resilience of Afghans, especially of the women, many women I've met throughout my time working with Afghans and Afghan women, the resilience they've shown against all the invasions and wars continues to amaze me. It really does. To address the needs of the women we evacuated in the US and in Canada, we started a program called Aghaaz, which means the beginning in Dari. This program provides tailored support to the evacuated women leaders as they begin a new journey in their new countries. It's a 2-track program that supports Afghan women-led organizations through grants to meet the immediate needs of Afghan women leaders in the US and in Canada, and a fellowship program where we will place 10 women with 5 like-minded organizations and partners, organizations that work on human rights, women's leadership, international development, advocacy, and resettlement issues. We will look forward to announcing who those women are later in the program, and we'll talk more about that. But first, I'd like to invite Vital Voices CEO and fearless leader to the stage, Elise Nelson, where she will lead a panel conversation with 2 Afghan women leaders, Nargis Nahan and Asila Wardak, and online with our guests, UN Special Rapporteur Richard Bennett and CARE's Senior Advisor Nora O'Connell. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Saba. Let's see, am I on? Yes. Thank you so much, Saba, not just for those beautiful remarks and setting this important event up today, but for your leadership. And when Saba says that Vital Voices is not forgotten, the Afghan women still in Albania, the Afghan women, most women still inside the country, there is an entire team here at Vital Voices who works tirelessly every day, and I thank you for your leadership of that team, and Spuzmai as well for your extraordinary leadership. I want to welcome these extraordinary women. I mean, when Saba talks about the courageous women leaders of Afghanistan, these two women in particular I have on my minds, but so many others throughout the country. I want to invite them to come up now. Asila Wardak. She is a leading women's rights advocate, former diplomat, delegate to the Doha peace talks, the first Doha peace talks with the Taliban in 2019. She served as the Director General of UN Affairs at the Afghan Foreign Ministry previously, and she's currently Commissioner of the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So welcome. Nargis Nehan, she is the former Minister of Mines and Petroleum. She is also a major force for women's leadership for Afghanistan. She has held senior positions in the Ministry of Education and Finance, and currently she's the founder of Canada's Feminist Forum for Afghanistan. Welcome. Joining us via screen, I think, is Nora O'Connell there? I know she is joining us, but I'll first move to Richard Bennett. He is the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan of the UN Human Rights Council. He was elected. He has played a major role inside the United Nations in every major conflict zone around the world, from Afghanistan to South Sudan and beyond, and really has been working to protect civilians and the rule of law. Prior to that, he was the head of Amnesty International's UN office. I also want to welcome my good friend, Nora O'Connell, inside the State Department. She is the Senior Advisor for Women and Girls in the Office of the Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts. And previous to that, she has worked with a number of women's rights organizations, including Women Thrive Worldwide and Save the Children, really dedicating her life to advocating for women and girls worldwide. So with this extraordinary group, let's get right to it. I want to first turn to Asila and Nargis, because, you know, when we all think about 3 years ago, those visions of Afghan women and children, you know, men heading to the airport, trying desperately to get out. I know that both of you were threatened. Your lives were threatened. You didn't want to leave your country, but both of you did evacuate. Asila, I want to start with you. Can you take us back 3 years ago? At what moment did it come into your head that you did need to leave your country?
Good morning, everybody. I think it's working, huh? Yeah. Thank you so much, Vital Voice, for providing this opportunity to me and then my friend Nargis to speak. I think it's really hard to recall that month and those days. It was really black days that turned to dark future for everybody, especially women and girls of Afghanistan. For me also, it was not an easy situation. I had so many hats. I was part of the Afghan Women Network. I was a diplomat working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was part of the High Peace Council. I was also a Human Rights Commissioner for the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And of course, my biggest hat as a human rights and women's rights advocate for so many years made me to leave Afghanistan. It was really difficult decision because first day I was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when the Taliban entered, and then we were working till 5:30 with other colleagues to give passports to everybody to leave because no one was aware that this situation will come. And unfortunately, there was no coordination between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at the palace. So we didn't know that the Taliban will that soon enter Kabul and ministry. So the first ministry that they came and entered, it was Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was notified by the guard that he came and excused and apologized that after this, so we are not anymore at the main gate of Foreign Ministry. So everybody is responsible for their own security. And then it was really tough situation. I came downstairs. Even I couldn't find that much time to go to my office and then grab my computer or other personal items from my office. So I came out and because I was living very close to the foreign ministry, and it was like a chaos at the street and Chorai Zambak and also Azizi Bank, and I was like just running. So I came home and then locked myself for actually 5 days. And on the 5th day, one of my cousin, he was at the airport, so he wanted to go to the airport, and on the way there was fighting between Taliban and American soldiers, so he got shot in his head. And someone called me from the airport that we found only this telephone number. I think he's your relative or friend or colleague. So then I had to jump to the emergency hospital, and then I forgot about my own personal security, that I'm under lots of threat. So it was really difficult situation. But thanks God that he at least survived, but with lots of injuries in his head and eyes. And then I decided that no, the situation is getting worse. So make it short, after 10 days, because me, Madam Nehan, and few others who lived in Kabul, we were going to the airport like every day. And then we were at the airport when that incident, the explosion happened also. So then we decided that because it's very difficult to travel by air, at least I had visa, Pakistan visa, and then I traveled by road to Pakistan because I was living alone in Kabul. All my families were in the US. Then I had arranged a trip with one of our other strong women feminist advocates, because she had at least a male company, her husband and her kids, and I was alone, and I could speak the language. So we left home at midnight by road to Peshawar, and then from Peshawar I called our colleagues, so they came, and then they took us from the Torkham border. We went to Islamabad. But that was also difficult because our bank account was frozen, and then I had to leave Kabul with only $270. And that was also another big problem, that where I should go. I have my passport, I have my visa, but who will give us tickets? But God helped us, so I left after almost 15 days of the collapse. I came to the US, and the second friend, she was there for 3 months in Pakistan, and then later on, with the help of Malala funds, she and her family evacuated to Canada. So that was the history of me, and then thousands of millions of Afghans who contributed to strategies to new Afghanistan for the past 25 years. And then we left the country with $270 and with a backpack. And we left house, we left the country, we left all hopes and achievements behind. And it's not easy. Maybe someone reading our op-ed or books or anything, but if someone put their own self in our shoes, it's really difficult. It's not an easy situation.
I can imagine that, because people probably look at you and say, "Oh, you're one of the lucky ones."
Yeah, you
but
left.
It's the situation you found yourself in. There's luck.
Yeah,
There's
there was
nothing.
no luck. That was not easy decision for someone that I put it, and then some of my colleagues know me that I spent more than 28 years of my life doing advocacy for women's rights. But leaving everything behind, it was not easy.
Nargis, I want you to share taking us back 3 years.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to thank Vital Voice for putting this extremely important program at a very critical time together. But I also have to thank you for your ongoing support since collapse till now, finding different ways to support women inside Afghanistan as well as outside Afghanistan. I don't want to go back to 3 years because my story is so much similar to the story of Ms. Wardak and thousands of us that we experienced that, with perhaps a little bit of differences here and there, but overall it was the same chaotic situation that all of us experienced. The only thing that I would like to add up is that I could see that within a few hours, how all of us that we were working as activists, leaders, and social entrepreneurs, we became liability even for our own families. I could remember that my family was calling around trying to find which one of our relatives are open and willing to host us. So that explains everything in terms of our change of situation. As a women's rights activist that I have been working since, I know myself, since class 6, I've been working day and night trying to help myself, my family, and then wider community. I find it highly frustrating and disappointing that today, with all the advancements that we have in the world, we are still sitting in this room talking about misery of women, not only in Afghanistan, in many other countries, and about all injustice that we are experiencing around the world. I find it highly disappointing, and I wish that we were in this room and today we were talking about how to increase women's participation in global affairs. How can we use artificial intelligence to build a more inclusive and equal society? How can we contribute to increase access to renewable energy? That is what the world is about today. It's not about misery, and it's not about controlling, and it's not about discrimination. And we have a long journey to start from where we are today until we're able to get there. Before getting to your question, 3 points I would like to highlight here today, which is very important and I believe will totally change the course of the discussion that we're going to have in the panel today. Just in 1 week in Afghanistan, we heard that a woman was sentenced to public stoning to death by the Taliban in Balkh province of Afghanistan for the crime of adultery, which is baseless. But the man was not punished the same way. He was just sentenced to a few years of flogging, a number of flogging. We also heard about barring UN Special Rapporteur for Afghanistan, Mr. Richard Bennett, from entering to Afghanistan just because of the reports and because of the documentations of the fact and highlighting the plight of the situation in Afghanistan to the world. He's barred. We also heard and shocked yesterday with the new law that the Taliban adopted and introduced, which is systematically institutionalizing all the discrimination and all the torture that they have been so far implementing it decree by decree and in some cases informally. They are trying to formalize that through that law. I just gave you a few examples of the restriction that they have introduced in that law. Previously, they banned women from going to school, from working, and they were requiring them that they had to fully cover their body and their head. But now they're saying that even when women are going outside their houses, their voices should not be heard by any men outside their family members. They have put a lot of restriction on men as well. And even small things such as in the community playing games among each other, even they have called that gamble and they have stopped that. The new law is quite shocking, and it's taking totally all the personal and as well as public freedom that people are having. So it's important for us that I hope we have a discussion today that how we can join forces and collect our efforts to be able to support Mr. Bennett's office so that he can continue work, because now he's also on our side. He's also banned from going to Afghanistan. Yeah. But also how
that says
we
something,
can...
certainly,
yeah.
when the
and
head
also
of human
how,
rights...
Exactly. And how we can bring the attention of the world about the situation seriously in Afghanistan and the consequences that's going to have around the globe on gender equality, on justice, on global security.
Thank you. Richard, I want to bring you into the conversation as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights. As was just said by Nargis, you have been banned from the country. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing inside and why was that decision made? I'm assuming you were doing your job.
Well, yeah. Thank you very much, Elise. But first, I will come to that. But I just want to make two preliminary points, as Nargis has done. One is to congratulate Vital Voices on the program Aghaaz, and to thank you and your partners for today's very important event. And the other is, without getting too political, I've noticed that in the US this week, especially in Chicago, this has been a week to demonstrate women's leadership. And so I'm very happy in this panel and in this event to be in a support role, because I think that is something that we need to see a lot more of. I must say that I'm, not very surprised that I've been told that I've been barred from traveling to Afghanistan, and it, I believe, is because, as Nargis has covered very well, of my reporting and my outspokenness, the reporting, the feedback I get from many Afghans is that my reports do reflect the reality in Afghanistan. So I have a sound methodology, I have a small but excellent team, and I fully stand by my reports. In other words, I think I have had an impact. I have kind of poked the bear a little bit. The second thing, and I will continue, the fact that I can't go to Afghanistan doesn't prevent me from doing my work. In fact, it is almost too risky, too dangerous for witnesses and victims to give testimony to me in Afghanistan now anyway. So, and around the world, unfortunately, a lot of human rights investigation and documentation has to be done remotely. So it's no different from quite a few other countries. The other point I would make, and this is just a kind of my own thoughts, is that Nargis has raised the three issues that I was also going to raise about this week. And I would make a little link to that between them. I think that the perception of the Taliban is that there are no consequences for whatever appalling behavior they do. That basically they consider that they're on the track to normalization, and that it doesn't matter if they stone a woman. They haven't stoned her yet, but they might, or kick out the special rapporteur, or pass a truly draconian law, because the international community, which is partly responsible, is not going to do much about it. And I think that we talk about impunity, and impunity means there are no consequences for unlawful or bad actions. And this, I think, is a perfect example. And since Nargis also mentioned the global consequences, there is a global rollback on women's rights, especially. Do you think that misogynists in other places are not watching Afghanistan? Do you think that they don't take note that there are no consequences for this kind of treatment of women and girls? Where is it going to stop? And that's why I have been advocating for Afghans to lead, supported by the international community, with an all-tools approach. Every tool that is available should be brought to bear on to bring about change and to bring about accountability. Whether it's the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, creating a new law on gender apartheid, the Secretary General, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, my colleagues in as other special rapporteurs. I think it's all needed to be brought together. I'll end up with an anecdote about this new what they call so-called vice and virtue law. Just before I came here, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, I was in another meeting with some Afghan journalists. One of them said that they had reached out to the Vice and Virtue Ministry for an interview about the new law. The first one point that the Vice and Virtue made was that they plan to implement the law fully. And the second point was that although this was a TV station, they could only do a voice recording because the Vice and Virtue said they are no longer allowed to make videos, to be on video. Video is haram, it's forbidden. That's an immediate example of this law being implemented. It's impacting women, but it's going to impact many other activities and groups. Journalism, and Nargis and Asila will know, it's covering men, but also different religious groups, different cultural groups, and I guess the question is, what does it take to reverse this trend and this emboldening? There was a meeting, many of you will be aware, in Doha a month or so ago, and Afghan women and no Afghans were involved in that meeting. And the agenda did not include specifically the rights of women and girls, or really human rights at all, in a country where this is the major issue. So to go to that meeting, to get around the table, the Taliban got everything it asked for. What message did it take away from that meeting? Are we now seeing the events of this week in the shadow of the Doha meeting? I don't know, but I just make that observation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being such a tireless advocate. Your voice is so critical there to have at the UN. Nora, I want to bring you into the conversation. Over the last 3 years, the U.S. has welcomed more than 100,000 Afghans who risked their lives, women, men, and their families, who really worked to bring democracy to their country. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the CARE office as it was set up just in those, days and months after August 15th? Talk a little bit about its purpose, but also I think one of the things from our perspective at Vital Voices and why we were very engaged, as Saba said, in the evacuation of women leaders and their families was not just because their lives were in great danger, because obviously they were, but also because there is incredible value in having those leaders with voice outside of the country being able to speak freely but also having the platforms to be able to do so. And that will come to our fellowship at the end of the program. We'll talk a bit more about that. But I wonder if you could speak to that, Nora, both from your perspective as the head of women's issues at CARE, but also just from your background in advocacy and policy around women's rights.
Thank you so much, Elise. And first, I just want to thank you for including me in today's event and say what an honor it is for me to be here. And as you know, we've been working together on these issues for a long time. And I remember when Vital Voices started under the leadership of then First Lady Hillary Clinton. And I've actually participated in a number of Vital Voices training, from, working with women in Northern Ireland to Ukraine, supporting dynamic women leaders across different sectors in transforming their nations. And I've had the privilege of working alongside Vital Voices expert staff to shape U.S. policies on issues from Afghanistan to gender-based violence. And of course, the real power of Vital Voices is not just the incredible leadership of their staff and women like you, Elise, but it's the network of Afghan women leaders, such as the ones that are joining us today. And your deep commitment to lifting up your voices and helping you achieve your vision for your nation. I'm also very honored to be on this panel with Special Rapporteur Richard Bennett, as well as with Nargis and Asila, two amazing examples of the incredible resilience that so many Afghan women embody. And I am just humbled by your example that you provide to the world. So in terms of CARE itself, CARE is the center of the whole of government effort to relocate and resettle eligible Afghans who stood alongside the U.S. In their 20-year mission for 2 decades. Those brave women and men who, again, risked their lives for their countries. We evolved out of an Afghanistan task force that was stood up in August 2021 and became a formal office in 2022. And we work with partners across the State Department and overseas. So with the White House, with different U.S. government agencies, with UN and with UN partners such as IOM and UNICEF. But in addition to our strong government partnerships, we work very collaboratively with non-governmental partners such as Vital Voices. And, Vital Voices is an incredible partner because of both the expertise that they bring and because of their engagement with leaders like the ones joining us today, who can give us feedback on the work that we do and help us do our jobs better. And we are constantly taking that input and changing the ways that we work. We're using the data and the feedback that we get to innovate new ways of working within the U.S. government. There have been the U.S. immigration system was never set up to respond with the speed and scale that Operation Enduring Welcome demands. So one of the things that has really changed over the last 3 years is that we have rigorously used data, and I would emphasize gender data, so that we're looking specifically at Afghan women and girls to be able to understand how we can do our jobs better, to make sure that we're addressing the gender-specific barriers that face Afghan women and girls who could come to the U.S. and start their lives here under Operation Enduring Welcome. So simply put, CARE's role is to relocate eligible Afghans, including those who might have worked directly for the U.S. government, or people who may have worked for U.S. NGOs, like many of you, or who may have just served their countries as in parliament or as judges and other kinds of ways, and to support the ultimate resettlement in the U.S. So CARE handles the planning and logistics to prepare eligible Afghans to move to one of our overseas processing sites, because, of course, the U.S. does not have an embassy in Afghanistan where we can do that kind of processing. So over this time, we have gone from, I think, being an emergency task force to trying to operate with urgency and efficiency to address the challenge at scale, recognizing, as you said, Elise, that is not only that the women and girls have earned the opportunity to come to the U.S. because of the special relationship that they have with the U.S. over the 2 decades, but as importantly, because these women and girls are the future of our nation, the future of their nation, the future of the global community. And we are fortunate and privileged to welcome them to the U.S.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to come back to you, Asila, picking up on something that Special Rapporteur Bennett said about the Doha peace talks and the fact that, as we all know, research has said, it is highly, highly likely that much more likely that you will reach a peace agreement if women leaders are at the table, and that those peace agreements will be enduring. But yet, women have been excluded from those peace negotiation tables. Talk a little bit about what we can do to change that. I mean, obviously, I know it's an uphill battle, but women originally were included. Tell us what's going on right now.
Thank you, Elise. I must say that maybe some of our colleagues or not agree with me, but Doha process, especially Doha 3, was a failure for the entire UN family. Because exclusion of not only women's participations, civil society organization, but exclusion of human rights and women's rights agenda from the whole entire agenda of the talks or the conference, which is about Afghanistan, it's insane. But one thing that from another side, our colleagues at the UN saying that no, women were there. But yes, women were there after our lots of advocacy, because we did lots of noises and advocacy, because at the beginning, they excluded, they said no women, no human rights agenda, nothing. But of course, in very much hurry in the last week, they just picked few sisters from inside Afghanistan or outside, and then they brought them without any coordination, without any consultation. Yes, there were women, but there was no any consultation mechanism that they should discuss that we are doing to Doha, and then we are presenting the half of population or entire generation. What should you were asked? We should do consultation, but unfortunately nothing has happened. And then it was very in hurry. They went and participated in a very show manner, one-man show, and they came back. But there was not also any follow-up or anything else. But this is, as I said, that this is the failure of the UN, because UN is committed and US has a mandate, and then they have to, if they forget about Afghanistan and Afghan women or girls, but they have to be, they have to fulfill their own mandate and commitments towards women's inclusion. And after that, to be very honest, personally, I lost my interest and then my trust on women, peace and security agenda, on human rights agenda, because it's not only Taliban that turning their faces from us, unfortunately, but the UN also turned their faces. And then they prefer to go to Kabul, sitting with Taliban, and then whatever they are preferring, they are following that agenda rather than listening to us. So it's not a good sign for UN also, because we are leaving our trust for UN, but still we are struggling, because it's very much important. Women of Afghanistan, we failed so many times. We were out of the doors, we were out of the seats and table, but still we continue our struggle. And then I kindly and humbly request the international community to not forget about Afghanistan, at least because it's a joint effort. It's not only our responsibility to shout or to talk or to advocacy, but it's a joint responsibility of international community, UN, and all stakeholders to think, because as my colleague Richard Bennett mentioned about, it's not only, I was thinking that maybe today they banned Richard Bennett, yesterday they banned women, and tomorrow they will close UNAMA office and other organizations like other international organization or UN Women Office, because no one is even talking about all these things. But women's inclusion is very much important, because another failure was the first Doha agreement, where there was no government involved, where there was no Afghan meaningfully involved. It was imagine the whole entire world, they forgot about Afghanistan government and Afghan people. They signed a contract with terrorist group. We are very much disappointed, Ellis, but still we are struggling, because it's our country, it's our future. we have to fight for our rights, and then to include more women. Once again, from this platform, I call on UN Women and all other UN organizations, especially UN Security Council, because it's your mandate. You have to include women, you have to give platform. And the last thing about UNAMA mandate also, because we contributed a lot to the UNAMA mandate, especially to the human rights component, that they should give platform to UN, to women, Afghan women and girls, those that they are in country. I don't want someone from outside the country to raise on behalf of us, give the platform to sit with Taliban and then ask about their demands. But unfortunately, UNAMA also failed. There is no platform given to women or girls inside the country. It's like, it's not a good sign.
Richard, I want to bring you back into the conversation, talking about the UN. And you've had a long career, as I mentioned before, worked inside Afghanistan previously. You talked about how the Taliban is more emboldened right now. And, you know, when I think back to the 1990s, late 1990s, when the Taliban took power the first time, you know, it seems like it's much worse. Is that a correct statement? And why? Why do they all of a sudden they feel more emboldened when actually there's a lot more information that's able to get out of the country about the situation, right? If we think back, you know, 25 years ago, it was more difficult for us to know what was going on inside the country, where today with social media, being more deeply connected, we know more about what is going on. So why are they more emboldened now?
Am I on mute, or you can hear me?
No, you're on.
Very well.
Okay, you can hear me. Great. I think I would just, thank you very much for the question. I make a couple of observations to begin with. I think what we observe with the Taliban is that their tightening of their grip is step by step. We saw the latest steps this week that we've already described. They started off in 2020 in Doha, and Asila will remember this, as saying that they changed, saying that they would be different this time. They didn't put anything in writing, but they made kind of promises. And even after they took over on August 15th, the spokesperson, who's still the spokesperson, Zabiullah Mujahid, said that they would be different this time in relation to the inclusion of women. They also announced a general amnesty as well. And even when I went on my first visit to Afghanistan and met pretty high-level officials, Minister of Foreign Affairs, other ministers, 2 deputy prime ministers, they were all saying that they will respect human rights and the right, including CEDAW, and the rights of women, provided it's not in conflict with Islamic Sharia. They always had that get out. And when they closed the schools, they said initially, it's only a temporary measure to recreate the conditions that are suitable for a segregated education for girls and women. And we have a working group, and it'll report back. And they made lots of these kind of statements. And then over time, those statements have changed. And what we've seen are now the messaging being, when it comes to women's rights and when it comes to human rights, it's an internal matter. It's none of your business. And no further explanation. When you say, is it worse than it was in the 90s? I think they have moved back to the situation of the 90s incrementally, because, as I've said when I spoke earlier, because they have noted that they're not being put under pressure. There are few, if any, consequences from the international community, and they are testing step by step. And as Asila said, this week they banned me from traveling to Afghanistan. They also introduced this new and draconian law. What will come next? So I think it despite all the additional information, the reason is that they, and I use the word emboldened, or I think at least they have noted that they do not need to slow down towards their goal of creating their version of an Islamic emirate, which in fact is a totalitarian state.
Do you think at this stage there are pressures that can be applied, particularly coming on the heels of what just happened over the past week? Are there pressures that can be applied? And I, in many ways, I do understand the position of the UN in terms of the need for external pressure and, countries around the world stepping forth, right? How do we do that? And do you see any glimmers of hope or anything that's working?
I think there are some entry points. I do want to say that I think that I am for engagement. I am not for isolation. I think, first of all, it's important that there's still that humanitarian aid continues to be delivered to the Afghan people, and that is in such a way that it reaches the people who really need it most. And the system needs to make sure that that happens. I also agree that there should be a dialogue. And, in my response to being, banned from traveling, I said that constructive dialogue is the answer, not cutting off relations. And I think that takes us back to the process that was started in Doha. I don't think it necessarily needs to stay there, but I think that there needs to be some kind of political process that Afghan women need to be included in a meaningful way in any discussions and negotiations about the future of Afghanistan. They have set up, I understand, they're setting up a couple of working groups. They're on counter narcotics and I think on business in the private sector. You do have to start somewhere, but I agree with Nargis and Asila that you can't really have an elephant in the room and pretend it's not there. And that is clearly the situation of women and girls. Where is there meaningful common ground? I don't know. I think it's for Afghans to decide what that is. I mean, I'll offer a couple of thoughts. I think something like child health might be, and maternal mortality. I don't know if there is any chance of finding meaningful common ground, but I think there are maybe some areas, maybe in relation to a few of those issues, but they have to be really meaningful issues and inclusive issues as well. So perhaps bringing it back in terms of hope to the international community, there are still some in the international community that remain committed to principles. And I fully agree with the comments that you, Elise, made at the introduction of this second round of questions on women, peace and security. And I kind of would call on member states to apply this in particular to the situation of Afghanistan. And a second group would be those countries that have declared feminist foreign policies. So, my challenge is, please get together, talk about this, consult with Afghan women and girls, and demonstrate how a feminist foreign policy works in action. This is your chance and your challenge.
And of course, I think some of us may be aware that Afghanistan still sits on the 45-member body of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And I want to bring you back into the conversation, Nargis, because you have been working on an incredible campaign really to get the international community, the United Nations, to recognize what is happening inside Afghanistan, as well as Iran, as gender apartheid. Talk a little bit about that and how that might be an angle to push and also a rallying cry to get people engaged. We know there are so many crises going on around the world. There are also a lot of elections going on around the world. This is the year of elections where more than half the population lives in countries going to the polls. There is a lot going on. So getting people's attention is hard. But I think this campaign is really interesting. It's been something that we at Vital Voices have supported as well.
Thank you very much, Alice. Before I respond to you, I'm asking a quick question back from you. Do I also have to include my recommendation in this round, or I have the chance of sharing it another round?
I think that you should share it now.
There are a couple of points that I would like to share. The campaign for gender apartheid, I really appreciate and thank you for giving me so much of credit for something that I've been just a small contributor. But the whole fight for recognition of gender apartheid started with the young girls going on the street and protesting for their rights inside Afghanistan. All credit goes to them. Rest of us are just supporters. It started from there. Many of those girls, as you're all very well aware, they were detained, they were abducted, they were tortured. Some of them were even raped, and some are still disappeared. We don't know where they are. But those that they are evacuated after that, they continue this campaign in different parts of the world. And the rest of us are trying to just help them out. It's very important that when we talk about the collective failure of the international community, Afghan political leaders, and as well as the Afghan government, we also acknowledge and recognize the struggle, the resilience, the resistance, and the leadership of Afghan women. In the last 3 years, the world did not stand with us the way that we deserved that they had to stand with us, the way that they claimed that they stand for humanity. But Afghan women and girls did not give up. Those inside Afghanistan protested. Those of us outside sitting in the hotels and the camps continued giving interviews, writing, having meetings, making noises, using social media, but we just made ourselves heard. While the Taliban continuously in the last 3 years have been talking backdoors with the international community, have been asking for incentives and getting them right away and trying to push for their recognition, we on the contrary pushed and advocated for justice, which is recognition of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Because there is a systematic and institutionalized discrimination against women inside Afghanistan. So, and why we started this whole advocacy, I believe, I see the leadership and the strategic vision of Afghan women in this whole campaign. Why? Because even if the gender apartheid codified tomorrow, still it's not going to hold accountable those that they did to Afghan women in all injustice and discrimination before that. But the reason that we are pushing that, we just want to make sure that after this, no woman should suffer in any part of the world the way that we are suffering. We saw that there is some gap in the international mechanism in terms of accountability of perpetrators. And with the support of the international experts, we are trying to address that. So that is what all gender apartheid and the whole campaign is about. And the beauty of this campaign is that it's highly decentralized. You will see a woman political talking about it in a political context. You will see an Afghan singer singing about it in her context. You will see the Manija Talosh, for example, going and using her 1 minute in Olympic and just saying that free Afghan woman and end gender apartheid. Every Afghan woman, and to some extent some Afghan men, are actually using every platform that they have to raise their voice, or actually advocating for recognition of gender apartheid. And that's highly decentralized and owned by everybody, which is really beautiful and very organic. So for us, it's important that we recognize that. And we think that once the gender apartheid is recognized and codified, which eventually it will happen, maybe not now, maybe later, but it is going to happen at some point, the world will make the case and say that Afghan women were suppressed, they were discriminated, they were stripped away of all their rights, and this is how they fought back. They try to have the mechanisms at the international level in the place that will not only serve them, but serve the rest of the world. That is the kind of leadership that we expect from all the women around the globe, to stand for justice at the global level and make sure that we have the mechanisms in place. A couple of recommendations from here onward that I would like to share with you, and as well as the audience, and most of them are my sisters that we're all working, and brothers that we're working in Afghanistan. I think for us, it's very important that we continue building resilience of the women inside Afghanistan. We cannot politicize the situation and say that do not send any support to Afghanistan because of the situation, because it's benefiting the Taliban. We cannot torture our own people. So every one of us at the personal level, official level, in whatever way we can, we have to continue providing support for those that they are inside Afghanistan. We have to do that. And for that, we need your support. And we should not just, every time should come with long justification of why it's important to do it, how we should do it. It just should happen from all of us. The second recommendation that I have is that many Afghan women groups in different countries now have created platforms, because we saw that the world is not interested to really collaborate and support us the way that they were claiming. So many of us concluded that time has come that we take more responsibility, regardless of getting any support for it or not. Because Afghanistan is our country, our future and our responsibility. It is not a project the way it is for some countries. It's our country. So many initiatives are taken, platforms are created, and processes are established, which are owned and managed by Afghan. I highly recommend that. They have their shortcomings, they have their weaknesses, but they are a good start. Continue providing support for them, continue providing technical support for them, and continue providing feedback for us to be able to make them diversified, inclusive, and more effective, and increase their impact. It's also important that you help us with the state-level advocacies. Right now, there are only 11 countries that they have come forward and they have shared positive signs for recognition of gender apartheid. But we are talking about a lot of countries to be able to get that codified at the international level. So we have to, we start working at the state level to be able to convince and work with those states that they are doubtful about it, that we bring them on board for supporting recognition of gender apartheid. So state level advocacy is important. The Committee 6 of the UN is meeting in October, where actually they're going to endorse and prepare the treaty for recognition of, for crime against humanity. It's an excellent window of opportunity for us that we start, all of us, from every platform and mechanism that we have in place, that we advocate and we convince them that they include gender apartheid as a crime against humanity. It's a very short period of time, but nevertheless, we have to give it a shot and we have to advocate for it. It's also important for us that while we are working for codification of gender apartheid, it is a long-term process. We cannot expect it to happen in a year or even in 2 years' time. It is time-consuming, we understand that. That's why I totally endorse and recommend what Richard actually has presented in his report, and that's all tools accountability. We have many tools at the international level. For example, UNHCR 1325, CEDA, and many other resolutions based on which we can, the international community, hold the Taliban to account, and we should continue advocating for all those tools accountability. Just 3 more points. We also need to train women inside Afghanistan, especially those that we know that all the activists are evacuated and they're not inside Afghanistan, that they learn how to document all the violations of the human rights and how to preserve all those evidence, because we know that later on it's going to serve us and help us when we are going ahead to International Criminal Court and others. And in terms of, it's important that we make sure that Afghanistan stays in the agenda of the international community. We see that every year or in worst case scenario, in normal case scenario, every 2 years, we have something happening around the globe. And then that gets attention of the whole globe and they forget about like anything else. The Afghan women have been working really hard in the last 3 years to be able to at least try to maintain Afghanistan in some part of the agenda of the international community. So for us, it's very important that we have your support and we continue organizing ourselves more, that we continue having meetings, webinars, conferences, researches and reports, that we continue documenting and reminding the world about Afghanistan and the situation. And most importantly, about the consequence of the situation that we have on the rest of the world. Because some of the experts are already sharing their concern. They say that the new law that's adopted by the Taliban resonates a lot with many of the decrees that are introduced by ISIS in Syria. So they see like a lot of similarities between them. And that clearly shows the expansion of extremism and military extremism around the globe. So we have to work for that. And accountability, the last point is accountability of the countries is really important at the state level. Why? Because in the last 3 years, we saw that all countries went on their own. Bilaterally, they had transactional engagement with the Taliban. Some of them offered assistance. Some of them offered for them international conferences and platforms. Some actually hosted their families and provided scholarships for their family members. Some gave them Afghanistan embassies. Some gave them the consulates and others. These were all bilateral individual engagement of the member states based on their own interest, based on their own benefits. So it's important that we also continuously call on the international community that we need a united approach. We need them to build consensus on how they're going to hold Taliban account. We are here to help them to do that, but it's just important that they come together and they do it, and they do it genuinely. Otherwise, with the situation that we have in the world, we lost everything. There's nothing left for us. Even our future generation is going to be millions of uneducated girls and millions of brainwashed boys that I don't know how the world is going to deal with them. But just think about your own future, think about own security, and based on that, try to help us to change the situation in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you for that incredible list of recommendations. And I go back to something that Richard said earlier, that the world is watching what happens in Afghanistan. It doesn't happen alone in a vacuum. The world can see that, and it is what happens in Afghanistan is deeply linked to women's equality worldwide, and the rollback we're seeing around the world as well. I know that we are out of time for this conversation, but I also know that we probably have some burning questions in the audience. So I want to ask our experts, if you are able to stay a few more minutes, we'd love to go out and take a few questions. Richard, Nora, are you all right to stay a few more minutes? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Great. So we're going to go out to the audience. Oh, wonderful. And if you could just give your name.
Sure. Thank you so much, Alice. And thank you so much, everyone, for very fantastic debate and discussions. And it's really, really, although it was hard to hear from 3 years back we went, but it was nice to remind, and especially remind the international community. And it is a great privilege that today we have Nora from CARE. And it was for me, for 3 years, I was looking forward to how that we could approve. But thank you so much, Vital Voice, for have Ms. Nora here. I know they have done great job for the last 3 years. And I wanted to acknowledge and appreciate all their works, but still there is a lot. And particularly for those women that they are in Albania, myself, every day with all up and down challenges right now I have here to struggle with my life, every day I receive messages every morning from those women, and they are asking us, because we were part of these evacuations from the beginning. They are asking that why we are still there. I really wanted to know, and if there is any chance for us, Nora, that we wanted to come, because I really wanted to do something to bring the attention of all the international community, particularly those organizations that they are involved in the evacuations. Those women in Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and particularly Albania, because from out of more than 2,000, only 12 women are left there. And I really wanted to hear from you, what can we do? And please let us know how we could work and how we could support these women. Thank you so much again for this.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Nora?
So thank you so much for that question. And in CARE, we are proud of the fact that we have helped resettle 90,000 Afghan women and girls in the U.S. since August 2021. And yet we are also keenly aware for those women and girls who are still waiting for their case to be processed or to know what their opportunities that are going to be for them, that those numbers mean nothing. And so we appreciate you continuing to highlight the women wherever they are in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Albania for us and for the role of Vital Voices in supporting those women while the process is undergoing. And because we know that the refugee process in particular can be long and unpredictable. And so what we can do in CARE, and that's not, we don't control kind of the processing part of it, but where we do work with our partners in across the State Department is trying to help make sure that those women and girls who are in Albania have programming that supports them while they are there, that they have psychosocial support, that they have enrichment programming available to them. And I will just say that the programming that Vital Voices pioneered in Afghanistan in Albania for Afghan women is actually been held up as the gold standard across CARE for the best ways to support Afghan women during this time. And it is that approach that was taken by Vital Voices supporting their cohort has been expanded to support other groups of Afghan women while they are waiting. And again, I don't mean that to actually lessen the acknowledgement of the difficulty of those women who are still waiting outcome, but just to reassure you that these women are not forgotten. I could tell you every one of those women in Albania's names, and we know that they are waiting and that their family members are waiting for an outcome on that. And so we're trying to ensure, again, with our partners to make sure that at least they have the support with psychosocial support, with enrichment programming, with opportunities to be able to go out and do things in Albania to be able to make to help them cope with the time while their lives are in limbo. And just to say again, like we know that Afghan women and girls have had to demonstrate incredible resilience over the past 3 years, but we also know that being resilient doesn't mean that you don't need support. So you talked about the women in Albania, but we also have women who are on our platforms, and we work with our partners, again, across the State Department, with NGOs, with UN agencies during that critical moment of women's transition from their life in Afghanistan or Pakistan or wherever they were on their journey to the US, to make sure that they are getting mental health services so that they can, start to process the stress and the trauma that they may have gone through, but also to help them access training opportunities, whether it's just understanding what the job market might be in the U.S. for those who have had, were vitally employed in Afghanistan, or for those who are just developing their computer literacy wherever they come to us, to be able to start building those skills so that they can ultimately, have the successful life that they want for themselves and for their daughters once they arrive in the U.S. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. And Mary, I'll just add from Vital Voices' perspective, and I know that Saba said this earlier, that we will continue to work tirelessly until every last Afghan woman leader and her family members are permanently resettled.
And I just wanted to jump in that we do actually have the woman from Albania online, and they asked a similar question to Mary, but I did want to read it in their own words. In October 2021, we were promised that we will be relocated to the US. We left Afghanistan for a dignified life and education opportunities, but we all live in a mental distress of where should we go after waiting for 3 years.
I don't know if there's anything more you want to say, but
Just to say thank you for carrying, for carrying their voices, and we hear you. Thank you.
well, thank you. And do we have one last question, maybe? Yes, we have a question up there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Palwasha Hassan, and I'm Program Director at Mina's List. My question is to Richard. I don't know if he's still with us. On his all tools approach, I think that's very much important because we have quite of diversity among Afghan civil society and women's group, especially those who are in exile. I wouldn't say we are confronting, but I think the diversity is certainly there. And we have all different approaches based on our own experiences and our own skills and approaches. And I think this all tools has been referred by many of us because we find it a closer fit the way we could make Taliban accountable, but also bring in back the interest of international community to kind of like forgotten situation of Afghan women. But my question in particular is about the UN special assessment and then the proposal for special envoy and the approach which is kind of bringing back engagement and maybe a slow recognition of Taliban is going on. Where do you find that as a part of this all approach, all tool can fit there? Also, my question is to the Afghan colleagues is regarding conflict in Afghanistan is almost 45 years, and we had a lot of ups and downs in this period. We had another period with international community has forgotten, and that was after the Cold War. We had another period of Taliban taking Afghanistan over, and the situation was even worse than today because even the now we have till grade 6, but that time even we didn't have that schooling in that time. We had a lot of experiences of Afghan women, not depending on international tools or approaches, because first of all, many of the international tools that is supporting the situation or can support for advocacy purposes like 1325 and others started from maybe after 2000 onwards. But in that time, I think women has very much focused on themselves and they have navigated the most difficult spaces. Don't you think that we have kind of been driven away from depending on our own tools and approaches? What are we learning? So maybe, Asila, if you'd like to reflect on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want Richard to respond to the first question?
Yes.
Maybe we'll go to him first, and then we'll come to Asila for a last word before we close.
Thank you, Elise, and thank you very much for your question, Palwasha Hassan. Just before I answer it, I'd also like to, really appreciate CARE and especially Nora O'Connell for your great work. I know how well and how hard you work and how committed you are. My message is to other countries to look at the CARE program, and if you have programs to bring out vulnerable Afghan people or at-risk Afghan people, or if they're stuck somewhere, please don't stop those programs. Please put in the resources and accelerate those programs. And just to switch from Albania to Pakistan for a moment, during this discussion, I've been being messaged by a woman who is stuck in Pakistan saying, please don't forget me. So, so I just wanted to mention her. Now, in relation to your question and the all tools approach and the UN special assessment and special envoy and so on. I have been promoting the all tools approach, as have others, and I thank you for that. And I think what we need is a strategy and cohesiveness. I think there ought to be a clear theory of change and a strategy which is agreed jointly by Afghans, especially Afghan women, and the international community. Maybe that's what the Doha process could do, but it doesn't really exist yet. And Palwasha, you referred to the special assessment, and I think there are valuable things in that special assessment. One of the things was that that progress should be made around human rights benchmarks and benchmarks on women's rights as well. And so I think picking up from that and looking at the Doha process, I've said before, I think that that there need to be, in addition to the working groups they've set up, they need to establish a working group or do something about women and human rights. But I want to lift it up to the strategic level and the bringing together Afghans and the international community, and to come up with tools that are both carrots and sticks. We talked about accountability, that's the sticks. And Elise, you asked about, are there any glimmers of light? I think we need to look at incentives and carrots as well. But before anything, I just want to hold up here the statement that just about 10 days ago, no, it was just over a week ago, that not only me, but 30 special procedures mandate holders signed up. And look at the headline. The headlines is there. It says, international community must not normalize Taliban rule in Afghanistan. And that is until and unless the inclusiveness, the inclusion of women and civil society and progress is made on the rights of women and human rights. So with that, I leave it. And I just, one more thing. I think, and this is something that others have touched on as well, both Elisa and Nora. I think we need to use these tools, including WPS, to demonstrate that it's not just the right thing to do, that not doing it will have consequences. So it's in the national interests, it's in the global interest. But, frankly, countries act in their national interest. And we need to convince each country, including the US, that keeping Afghanistan high on the agenda and addressing the issues that we've been raising in this discussion today is in your country's national interest, let alone in the interests of Afghan people and of the country of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard. I want to thank you so much for your leadership and for spending so much time with us today. I want to turn to Asila for just a final word to send us forth some final recommendations before we close and introduce our fellowship.
Thank you so much. I think nothing has been left to me. Everything was said, recommendation by Ms. Nehan. But last word, I would like to congratulate Vital Voice and the entire team for having this Aghaaz. Aghaaz start. I hope it's not the end in Aghaaz. So it should be continue to provide fellowships to Afghan.
I keep saying it's the first cohort.
Okay, it's the, yeah.
We hope for more.
It's very much important because, first of all, if we are talking about women and young generation inside the country, we should also consider those that they left the country. So don't waste our. I would like to ask international community to not waste or to not let our young generation, those that they came to these countries with all expertise and experiences, whether it's in music or in arts or with any experience and expertise that they brought. We have to give them more opportunities by providing these kind of fellowships and opportunity to build up on their capacities. And last but not least, I would like to also ask international community, because we still have, though we don't have the mechanism, the reporting mechanism or the system in the country, but we do have a big number of women that they are still victims of violence cases. It's very much important to support and help them inside the country, especially poverty is there, and also men, they lost their jobs, women, they lost their job, a big number of women that they are suffering of family violences. There should be kind of rapid response or support to those. Also, as my colleague said, that humanitarian assistance, it's very much crucial. Also supporting of small women business entrepreneurship inside the country and outside the country is very much crucial. Supporting to the civil society organization is very much important, because we do have enough in our plates. From one side, we are doing free advocacy, but from another side, we have to do something like to enhance our financial. Something also came by Ms. Palwasha about the differences between 40 years back. Yes, 40 years back was totally different thing. Like I can give you my example of my parent, that 40 years back, my parents, when they came to the US, they were taking picture out of the White Palace. But today, their daughters, I'm trying to enter to the White Palace and then talk with President of US. So this is the difference. And one thing that we should learn also from our past, that we should build upon our resilience, because we are the generation of resilience. Unity is very much important about Afghan men and women. In the past, yes, we were not that much relying on the international aid or international support, but now we have to, because without international support, without their advocacy, without their financial support, we cannot do anything, unfortunately, because it's everybody knows the situation of Afghanistan. But one thing, it's very much important, unity about Afghan women and also men, because we are divided into groups. And my colleagues, Ms. Nehan mentioned about the one stand, sorry, I lost my voice. One single stand by international community or UN Security Council, but at the same time, we really need one stand of Afghan. We are divided. We really don't know. Someone is asking for war. Someone is pro-dialogue. At the end of the day, we also confuse the international community that what we really want. So this is also important, resilience. We are the generation of resistance, but also we have to come with one solution and one single stand in terms of future of Afghanistan.
Thank you. I think that is a great place to end our discussion. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Richard, Nora, Nargis. I'm sorry that we didn't come back to you, but we do hope that those of you who are here will join us over lunch and further discussion. I now have the privilege and honor of announcing an exciting new initiative that Saba alluded to earlier. And I am going to ask our new fellows to come up on stage in just a moment. I think I'll never forget back in 2001 when the Taliban fell And we began at Vital Voices. We were a brand new NGO, just out of the State Department. And we were working with Afghan women leaders, working with them, supporting them to get on television, to talk. We saw a lot of people on television talking about Afghan women, but no Afghan women on television talking. So we worked with a number of women in the diaspora. And one of those women, Farida Azizi, I remember she was called up by her, I guess, her welfare agent, who, she had come on asylum to the United States, and they were trying to help her get a job. And, she put me on the phone with this agent. She said, she didn't show up for her interview today at 7-Eleven. How am I going to get her a job? And I said, well, she didn't show up because I don't know if you turned on the TV tonight, but not only was she with President Bush on stage talking to him and Laura Bush, the First Lady, about the situation in Afghanistan. But then if you turn on the TV a little later on tonight, you're going to see her on Capitol Hill standing next to Senator Hillary Clinton. She said, oh. I told that story to Secretary Clinton, and the very next day she sent a then anonymous, I'm now making it public, gift to Vital Voices to be able to hire Farida as a fellow at Vital Voices. I'll never forget that. And I think as I know so many extraordinary Afghan women who were ministers in their country, who fought on the front lines alongside the United States for democracy, and I think about they can't end up at 7-Eleven or as Uber drivers. They need to be in positions and have platforms where their voice can continue to be heard. They need to be in positions of leadership, lending their valuable expertise to us here in the United States and around the world. So with that, I want to announce our new Aghaaz program, which is a holistic 6-month fellowship. We are announcing it with our first cohort of 10 fellows. Today I'm going to announce 8. We will have 2 more in the coming weeks. This is an incredible fellowship because it not only places Afghan women leaders within organizations who deeply understand the value that they'll bring to that organization, but it also provides them with a stipend for those 6 months of $40,000. And it provides them with holistic leadership training so that they can work on a capstone project. And our hope is really that this gets them on the path. They're on the path, but I just mean this gets them the platform that they need to take that next step, to play the leadership role that is so desperately needed from Afghan women inside this country and globally. So I want to just first thank our partners who made this possible. It wouldn't be possible without them raising their hands and say, yes, we want to be part of this. I want to acknowledge them. Counterpart International, Women for Afghan Women, Mina's List, Afghan American Foundation, and the Afghan American Women's Association. So let's give them an applause. I really very much appreciate. Most of the fellows that I'm about to announce were actually evacuated as part of the efforts by Vital Voices, Mina's List, Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security, State Department, and others as part of that coalition. So let me announce them now. And actually I'm going to ask them to come up here because I know many of them are here. And if I could just ask you to stand on the stage with us, and thank you, Asila and Nargis, thank you so much. So first, going to Women for Afghan Women, we have Lima Anwari. Lima, are you here? Oh, wonderful. Also going to be a fellow at Women for Afghan Women is Marwa Talash. And just to say a quick word about both of these women, they have both been strong advocates for girls and young women's rights, as well as marginalized ethnic communities and peace-building efforts inside Afghanistan. So thank you both. Our next two, please stay. Our next 2 fellows going to the Afghan American Women's Association, Medina Talash a sister of Marla. She was a medical student whose education was interrupted by the Taliban, and she's currently working to support the online education for Afghan girls. So thank you for that. Also going to the Afghan American Women's Association is Shala Shaikh. Welcome. And just a moment to say a few words about Shala. She's a journalist, women's rights advocate, who founded the first Voice of Women radio in Eastern Afghanistan, and she's led a number of media projects focused on women's empowerment. Going to the Afghan American Foundation, Shala Farid. She is an academic and legal scholar and a women's rights advocate. Also going to the Afghan American Foundation is Zainab Pirzad, a journalist and women's rights advocate who has made significant impact reports around women's issues. Going to Mina's list, and we're so thrilled to welcome Bilal Aghaaz. Bilal is an incredible male ally. And I think all of us know how absolutely critical it is in Afghanistan and everywhere around the world to have great allies. He is a security and operations expert whose work underscores a deep commitment to supporting and advancing Afghan women's rights and empowerment. Also going to Mina's list is Shafika Palawak. I don't think Shafika is with us today, but I had the great privilege of spending time with her when we visited, when Saba and I visited the women leaders and family members that we had evacuated to Albania. She is an extraordinary poet. She's a women's rights advocate and the president of Musawwar Foundation. She's published books and provides scholarship specifically for women in rural Afghanistan. And she will be also with Mina's list. We will be announcing 2 more fellows who will be going to Counterpart International, so stay tuned. But I just want to say a huge congratulations to you. We had more than 50 applications. And I know for our team it was a very difficult process, but we are so honored, really, to have you as the very first cohort of this Aghaaz Fellowship. So thank you. And I know we'd love to get a picture also with Saba and Spoojmai. And please, Nar, just come back. And Asila, come back, and we'll take a quick photo. And then I'm going to invite my colleague Saba to give closing remarks.
Thank you all so much. You know, it's really emotional, actually. I think for all of us, I can speak for myself. Seeing some of you in Albania, seeing you here as our first cohort of Aghaaz Fellows is really, I feel like it's come full circle. But as has been said previously, this is just the beginning. And we hope that with your continued support and with new partners, we can continue to support the fellowship and the program and all the great work that we've all been able to do together. You know, hearing about what's happening in Afghanistan, inside Afghanistan, and what's happened since 3 years ago is really hard. It's really difficult to think about what the women are going through, women and girls are going through inside the country. But also seeing you all here and working with you all, I do see a hope that we will continue the fight. We will not give up. We will not forget about Afghan women. And it is through our partnership with Afghan women that we will keep this going, because you all are fighters and are champions. And you have a partner with Vital Voices, and we will continue to work with you to fight and advocate. But thank you all so much for being our partners, for being our friends, for being our supporters, and we will continue our work in the future. These were great ideas and suggestions and recommendations. I'd like to really thank our great panelists, Asila John, Nargis John, Richard Bennett, and Nora, who were also provided great insights. Thanks to the State Department for their ongoing support of our Voices Against Violence initiative, which allows for a lot of this work, and our private donors who supported the Aghaaz Fellowship. And I would like to thank our small but mighty team who helped put this fellowship together. Noha, who is on maternity leave, many of you all know, has been working with partners to find partners and fellows, and Spuzmai and Usher and Nabila and Fatima and Isabel, our Vital Voices team, who's been working nonstop. So thank you all so much. And I welcome you all to the third floor, where we can have lunch and more networking and conversations. Thank you for being here.